This is Robert Landau with another episode of America's Greatest Personalities. I am the Live Life Well TV host. This episode, it is my sincere pleasure and honor to talk to you about one of my favorite funny guys, the one, the only Don Rickles. So, stay tuned. So what we're doing with this series each and every week is lifting up a brush and painting a character portrait of the personality that is featured on each episode of America's Greatest Personalities. The words that are shared in this series become the paintbrush, and we are painting a character portrait this episode of, as I said before, the great Don Rickles. So, with that in mind, let's begin with some things that Mr. Rickles was famous for saying. He once said, "Every night when I go out on stage, there's always one nagging fear in the back of my mind. I'm always afraid that somewhere out there, there is one person in the audience that I am not going to offend." Don also said, when you stand alone and sell yourself, you really can't please everyone. But when you're different, you can last. He also said, you can't study comedy. It's within you. It's a personality. My humor is an attitude. Don Rickles also said, I don't care if the average guy on the street really knows what I'm like, as long as he knows I'm really not a mean or vicious guy. My friends and family know what I'm really like, and that is what is important. Mr. Rickles also said, I'm very shy, so I become very outgoing to protect my shyness. He also said, I want to be a dog, but I'm actually a pussycat. Milton Berle called Don Rickles the Sultan of Insult. Now, gee, I can't imagine why Mr. Berle would have said that. Don Rickles has also been called the King of Insult and the Merchant of Venom. And it was none other than the great Johnny Carson that, I wonder if you remember this from the numerous appearances that Don made with Johnny on The Tonight Show. Johnny would always call Don Mr. Warmth. You remember that? Whatever he's been called, one of the main things I want you to know about Don Rickles is that who he was on The Tonight Show, who he was on TV, who he was in Las Vegas, who he was on the silver screen, had nothing to do with who he really was off TV, off the Las Vegas comedy stage, off the silver screen. Donald J. Rickles was born in Queens, New York on May 8th, 1926. His father was from Lithuania. His mother was actually born in New York City, but her parents came from Austria. From an early age, Don wanted to be in the performing arts, but not the performing arts that you would associate with him now. He actually wanted to be a serious actor. Marlon Brando, Clint Eastwood, Clark Gable, Don Rickles. Why do you think that his initial wish just was not going to work for him? Unfortunately, particularly in the Hollywood of those days, it was the way he looked. Think of Clint Eastwood. Think of Clark Gable. Think of how Don Rickles looked compared to those guys. Nevertheless, nothing would deter him. He thought, you know what? I got serious acting chops. It doesn't matter what I look like. I can be just as good or better than all those good-looking movie stars. To that end, Don would attend the prestigious American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City and actually started to get bit parts in theater and television. In 1958, Rickles appeared with none other than Clark Gable in a film called Run Silent, Run Deep. But the operative word there was he appeared with Clark Gable, which meant that Clark Gable, maybe a little bit because of what he looked like, was the star of Run Silent, Run Deep, and Don appeared with him. Don started to experience really long windows of time between acting assignments, uncomfortably long windows of time between acting assignments. He finally had to face reality and conclude that it just wasn't happening the way he wanted it to happen, at least for now. So what do you think he decided to do? You might have guessed the answer to that question. He tried the nightclub stage. Rickles always knew that he had a pretty good, workable sense of humor, so now was the time to find out if anyone else felt the same way. So he started working some smaller comedy clubs in New York City. And how do you think he did? Unfortunately, not so good. What was different about his comedy in those days was the fact that the comedy he did was totally straight comedy. Comedy like every other comedian would do in a nightclub situation, and even the comedians on TV, straight comedy. How would things change for Don? Well, think about this. You're an up-and-coming comedian. You're trying the comedy nightclub stage for the first time, and things aren't going that well. And you know what? Those, as you can well imagine, are pretty tough audiences. And some of those nightclubs, I'm sorry to say, still are pretty seedy. So you have an hour's worth of material, maybe 45 minutes worth of material, but it's so difficult to do that on a comedy nightclub stage, even for experienced comedians who have a big name. Why? I believe it's because humor is subjective. What you find funny may not be the same thing that I find funny, may not be the same thing as the next person finds funny, or the next person, or the next person. So you're up on a stage being judged by people who go to a comedy club and sit there with their arms crossed, many of them, and say, okay, go ahead, make me laugh, and you better be good. Go on, go on. That is not easy. So one night, Don was trying to make them laugh doing his straight comedy, which was not going over very well, particularly that night. That night, in that comedy club in New York City, there happened to be an overabundance of people that were just not very impressed with Mr. Rickles' comedy. So there's always a little drinking involved in comedy nightclub patrons when it comes to them. So that night, there may have also been an overabundance of liquor that was being served, and heckling started to occur. Many people in the audience that night started to heckle Don Rickles because they just didn't think he was so funny, and they wanted to tear him apart because of the way he was doing. So Rickles finally had enough, and he fought back. And you know how he fought back? He started to hurl insults at all of those hecklers who had been hurling insults to him. And then something very interesting started to happen. Don started to notice that the rest of the audience was laughing at the insults that Don was hurling back at the hecklers. And then my guess is that after a while, the hecklers started to even laugh at what they were getting back from Rickles. if you don't know already, was a cruise director for close to 10 years on ships around the world. And so I would do a lot of emceeing. I was never a comedian, although I think some of the things I did might have been funny, maybe even in spite of myself. But when there's a lot of alcohol, there's heckling involved. That's just a given. And my take on that is that a lot of the hecklers just want attention. Maybe attention that they can't get elsewhere in their lives, and they just want to be recognized. And Don, in a very insulting type of way, but in a very comic and funny type of way, was giving what those hecklers might have wanted psychologically in return. Nevertheless, it turned out to be a win-win situation. And when Don realized that his insults that he was now hurling back at some of the members of that audience that night got more of a laugh than his regular straight comedy, he thought, yeah, know what? This is kind of fun. I'm going to change gears and be the Sultan of insults, as Milton Berle said. So now, not only was Don Rickles playing clubs in New York City, but also in Miami, and also he was playing clubs in LA. So now things might have been better in terms of gigs for Rickles, but he still wasn't really where he wanted to be. But as the fickle finger of fate would have it, it would be at a club in Miami one night that things would take a major turn for the better, almost overnight. Don's mother was good friends with Frank Sinatra's mother. Rickles' mama convinced Frank's mama to have Frank come to that comedy club in Miami and see Don's act. In typical Don Rickles fashion, when Rickles realized that Frank was in the audience that night with his rather extensive, exclusive entourage, Don took full advantage of the situation. If it had been anyone else saying things of an insulting nature to the one and only Frank Sinatra, they would have been toast in 30 seconds. But not so for Don Rickles. Old Blue Eyes was so impressed by what he heard that Frank insisted that all of his high-profile friends see Don's act immediately. And that, among many other things, besides putting Rickles on the map overnight, also began a lifelong, extremely close friendship between Frank Sinatra and Don Rickles. When Frank Sinatra liked you, baby, you got it made. And so it was for Don Rickles. On YouTube, I would urge you to find this wonderful video clip of the night that Frank Sinatra was filling in for Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show, and Don came out as his guest. There's also, even more so, look for this. There's a video clip of when Frank Sinatra was being interviewed by Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. And as a surprise to both Johnny and Frank, Don Rickles comes out. And the interplay between Don Rickles and Frank Sinatra in front of Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show that night is amazing. You must go onto YouTube and find that if it moves you to do so. So it wasn't long before Don was playing smaller lounges in Las Vegas, but even though they were smaller lounges, he didn't care. He was just so very happy and honored to be there. Vegas in those days was the place you wanted to play if you wanted to make it as a comedian. And in many ways, to a slightly lesser form, it still is. Don could breathe a sigh of relief because that was certainly the case with him. He was on the way to making it really big. He could also breathe another sigh of relief because he could now return to one of his other loves, acting. So now Don found himself playing roles on such popular TV shows as F Troop, The Andy Griffith Show, The Dick Van Dyke Show, Get Smart, The Munsters, The Addams Family, I Dream of Jeannie, I Spy. Oh my God, those were incredible shows. What happened to those? And so many more would Don guest on. But when Johnny Carson asked Don to appear on The Tonight Show for the very first time in 1965, that did it. Don Rickles and his unique brand of humor hit the big time. You know how it is, or was, with Johnny Carson and The Tonight Show. As an up-and-coming comedian, you would appear before the curtain. Johnny would give you a number of minutes to do a routine. And if Johnny, you could hear Johnny laughing in the background and the audience loved you. And when you finished, Johnny would invite you to come over and sit with him. My goodness, you couldn't ask for a better blessing, a better gift to catapult your career with a capital C than Johnny approving of you in that way. He was, Don, a frequent guest on The Tonight Show, and my goodness, that also formed a lifelong friendship. All Carson would ever have to do would be to introduce Don. Watch all the clips on YouTube of Don's appearances on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. It's great because Johnny wouldn't need to say anything. Don would do his whole routine sitting in the chair next to Johnny, and Johnny could never keep a straight face. And when I see those clips to this day, I could watch them every day. I can't keep a straight face either. Why? Because both of them are having fun. And well, it's kind of clean humor in terms of expletives. Dean Martin's infamous televised roasts were right around the corner for Don. Again, another absolutely perfect setting for Don's outrageous humor. To many people's surprise, Don Rickles has made absolutely unforgettable appearances at not one, but two presidential inaugural balls. And this clip is also on YouTube, and you must find it. Don embarrassed the heck out of Ronald Reagan at Reagan's inauguration. You've got to see that. And he also did the same thing to George W. Bush. And because it was Don, both of them, including Nancy, absolutely loved it. Movies would also come back into the picture, pardon the pun for Don. Now Don could play himself most of the time without being typecast in bit parts like he was before as a character actor. Don would also appear in a number of beach party movies with one, the only Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon. He would appear with Clint Eastwood, thank you very much, Telly Savalas, Carol O'Connor, and Donald Sutherland in a film that you might have seen or remember well called Kelly's Heroes. He was also the voice of Mr. Potato Head in Pixar's film unforgettable, a classic, Toy Story. And because that was such a success for Don, he made another appearance as Mr. Potato Head, the voice of Mr. Potato Head in Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3. And I think there might also be a Toy Story 4. Many more films would follow for Don. I'm sure it's no surprise that at that point in his career, when Don Rickles would play Las Vegas, he was no longer playing small lounges. Rickles was now a big-time attraction, and the hotels that booked him to appear would be guaranteed to make huge amounts of money, not only in ticket sales, but more importantly, in a way, in the hotel's casinos, because of the type of crowd that Don would always draw. There was one medium that Don could never crack the egg of, And if you haven't guessed it already, and it's not an easy thing to figure out, it was the medium, the fine art of the television sitcom. Show after show starring Don would either end mid-season sitcoms or wouldn't be renewed for the next. I guess you can't have it all, but Don really wanted to have a successful sitcom, but unfortunately, that just wasn't in the cards for him. And I think that was the universe's way of telling Don that when it comes to comedy on television, better stick to what he does best, and that was being his own mischievous, outspoken self without having to play a role in a recurring episodic sitcom. Don Rickles had what many call the Joan Rivers ethic of working. He loved to work. Besides his lovely wife, that was the most important thing in his life, and he couldn't get enough of it. And why not? That was his passion. And what he would give back to audiences from his heart, even though it was intense stuff, he would get back double. Here are some facts about the personal life of Don Rickles before we close. He met his wife Barbara when he was trying to get in to speak to a talent agent at the start of his career. She happened to have been that talent agent's secretary, and he could not get past her to speak to the agent no matter how hard he tried. He totally admired her tenacity, and they started dating. Don and Barbara would marry in 1965, and they would be together until his very last day. He often spoke about her in a comic but loving way on many of his appearances, such as on The Tonight Show and other talk shows. It is and was truly one of the few happy, loving, lasting show business marriages. They have two children, Mindy and Larry Rickles. Unfortunately, Larry, a very successful film and television producer, would pass due to complications of pneumonia back in 2011. He, at the time, was only 41 years of age. Altogether, ladies and gentlemen, the totally amazing Don Rickles appeared in no less than 27 major motion pictures, 51 television shows, not including talk shows now. I, for one, totally admire Don Rickles. I will always be a huge fan. He was real. He wasn't afraid. He said it like it was. He was tenacious. And he was a true show business survivor. Sadly, we would lose this truly great guy and truly great talent due to kidney failure on April 6th, 2017 at his home in Beverly Hills, California. The great Don Rickles at the time was 90 years of age. The great Don Rickles, in closing, could teach us all a very valuable lesson in life, and that is, do what you love. Put passion and heart behind it with a huge dash of humor, and you too will be blessed with a long, happy, and fruitful life. And when you think about it, folks, could you ask for anything more? This has been Robert Landau, Live Life Well TV host. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of America's Greatest Personalities. We'll see you at the next episode. Till then, God bless.